Hey guys, I wanted to take a second just to go through a few problems to review for the quiz, just some things I'm seeing wrong from many of us on the homework from the other day. So I want to start with period. I know that we know, I told you that period is equal to 2 pi over b if I have an equation, right? That comes from if you have an equation that is in this form, right? And it could say x, it could say theta. It doesn't matter, right? What the letter is, that's kind of irrelevant. The point is there's some variable that's representing the angle, and that's what I'm taking the sine or cosine of. So the way we find b is it's the number that's being multiplied by the variable in the parentheses, what you're taking the sine or the cosine of. So I want to just go through some examples quickly to show you what that means. In this case, there's a number inside the parentheses being multiplied by x. That means b equals 2. Once you know what b is, finding the period is very simple. We just do 2 pi divided by b, which in this case is 2 pi divided by 2. The 2's would cancel. Your period is pi. It's that simple. Some of you are trying to do too many extra steps to kind of do that. So I'm gonna put up like 5 problems. If you want to pause and try them yourself, you can do that. I'm just gonna work through 5 quick problems finding the period, and you can see how I did them. So here's the 5 problems. I'm just gonna kind of go through them one at a time. So this next one right here, we know that b is the number multiplying by the theta. B is 4. That means period is equal to 2 pi divided by 4. And then you can simplify the fractions. 2/4 turns into 1/2 pi, and that would be my period. Done. This third one I think has actually been giving us trouble. There's no number being multiplied by theta. So this has been true for a long time since we've just been doing algebra. If you have no number in front of a variable, it means what number is really there? It means there is a 1 there, right? So my b equals 1. My period equals 2 pi divided by 1. Anything divided by 1 is itself. So moving back to the top here, my b is 1/3. So this is when you would have to do still the same thing, right? It's 2 pi divided by 1/3. But when we have fractions with division, it's a lot easier to do the old school situation with the old division sign so that we know we can change it to multiplication and flip it, which means my period would be 6 pi. Okay. This next one, my b equals 6. So if I do period equals 2 pi divided by 6, 2 6 simplifies to 1/3. So it's 1/3 pi, or you could write it as pi over 3, same thing. And then this last one, my b equals 1/5. So it's a fraction again. That means when I do period is 2 pi divided by 1/5, it turns into a multiplication problem, and the period would be 10 pi. So that's period. That's a quick way to do it. Okay, next I want to talk about max and min and amplitude and just clarify something with that. So I think we're pretty good with the fact that the number in front tells me the amplitude, right? But this number is not necessarily the maximum, and the negative of that number is not necessarily the minimum, okay? What we have to understand is this. For any graph, right, all of the sine and cosine graphs are curves like this, right? There's going to be a midline, there's going to be a max, there's going to be a min. The amplitude is always the distance between the midline and either the max or the midline and the mid. Or the min, right? So if you find the total distance from top to bottom, that is not the amplitude, right? That is twice the amplitude. So when it comes to these equations, what you want to do to find the max or the min is, so let's look at this first example here. The first, find the midline, right? So if my midline is -3, in this case, there's no number in the front. That means what number is really there? It means the number that's really there is a 1. So my amplitude is 1. So what this means is amplitude is the distance you should go up from the midline and the distance you should go down from the midline to find the max and the min. So my max for this problem would be -3 plus 1 because I'm going up. So I would get -2. My min would be -3 because that's my midline, minus 1 because I'm going down, and it would be -4. Okay, so again, I'm going to flash up five more problems, and you can pause, try them yourself, and I'm just going to go through each one kind of quickly. Okay, so here for this second one, my midline is the +2. Okay, so my midline is y equals 2. This means the middle of my graph is at 2. My amplitude is 5, which means starting at 2, I need to go up 5 to find my max. And then from there, I would go down 5 to find my min. So my max should be 2 plus 5, which is 7. My min should be 2 minus 5, which is -3. Okay, so the max and the min does not necessarily equal the number that's in the front. Okay, again, this next problem, I guess I didn't number them. My midline is 5. My amplitude is 2. So notice these are the same numbers, but opposite from this last one. So this means my max is I start at 5 and I add 2, so I get 7. My min, I start at 5 and I subtract 2, so I get 3. Okay, so hope this is making a little more sense as I go through these. My midline here is 1. My amplitude is 4. So my max is 1 plus 4, which is 5. My min is 1 minus 4, which is -3. Okay, here, midline, -12. Amplitude, 8. So my maximum is -12 plus 8, which is -4. My minimum is -12 minus 8, which is -20. And this is not going to be on the quiz, but just to kind of elaborate on something here with this problem, okay? If I were to graph all of this, right, then what we would be looking at here is this. I'd have my graph. I would have a midline down here at -12, right? So I'm going to have some midline here. Okay, I know that my maximum height is now at -4. My minimum height is at -20. And from there, it becomes pretty simple because this is a cosine graph, which means we start at the maximum height. So I would start with my curve having a point here. And now I know I'm going to go down to -12, down to -20, back to -12, and up to -4. And then it will repeat. Okay, so that's kind of how we can go about that. And then last, we'll do this last problem. My midline is 6. My amplitude, this is a tricky one. The amplitude is 3. Just because there's a negative sign doesn't matter. Amplitude is always positive. Always, always, always. And so now my max is 6 plus 3, which is 9. My min is 6 minus 3, which is 3. What does that negative do? It just flips the graph. So instead of starting at the midline and going up, this one would start at the midline and go down first. That's all that's going on. So I hope that was helpful. The quiz hopefully won't be too bad. Just do your best and shoot me a question if you need. Good luck. Hey guys, actually I lied. I want to talk about one other thing. So people have asked me about calculator usage. So I just want to, let's take a look, for instance, of this example right here, 8 cosine 6 theta. If I try to graph this and I type in 8 cosine 6, you press the variable button, it'll say x instead of theta. Again, that doesn't matter. Minus 12. And if I just hit graph, wow, in this case, it looks kind of really funky. I think some other people have seen some problems where when they graph it, it looks like just a straight line sometimes, or in this case, it's a little bit of a curve, whatever. We have to remember two things. First of all, if we're doing 2 pi over b or whatever, we need to be in radian mode always to graph this stuff. Well, not always. Yeah, always. Unless it's like a word problem and it says something about there being degrees. Second of all, if you hit zoom trig, which is 7, what that will normally do, so I guess I should say the other thing we need to be careful about is just setting the window so that we're actually going to be able to see the graph. So what zoom trig does is it makes the min and the max for x equal to 2 pi and negative 2 pi. And it sets the min and max for y at negative 4 and 4. This didn't help us because we already did this problem, right? The min was negative 20. The max was negative 4. So what we really should be doing here is we need to make sure our min and our max are going to show the whole graph. So I want to go all the way down to negative 20 and maybe up to 0. That way I have a good picture of this whole graph, and that's what's going on. Now we can see that it's repeating all of this so much, but remember the reason for that was we did 2 pi over 6 to get our period earlier, and we got a period of pi over 3. So that means it's going through a full cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times in the span of 2 pi. So that's why we're seeing so much of this, right? If I were to change the window and say I wanted to go from like negative pi as my left side of the screen and pi as the right side of the screen, now when I graph it, it'll look a little bit less crazy because, again, every pi over 3, every 1/3 pi, it does a cycle. So there's 2 pi over 3. There's 3 pi over 3. So I just wanted to kind of talk about what some ways to use the calculator. Be careful. We want to be in radian mode. Also, I do want to encourage you, if you're doing a problem like this, don't be scared to use Desmos. Okay, go ahead, go to desmos.com and you can graph it and it'll take care of that stuff for you. So anyways, hope that helped and have a great weekend.